Jesus taught chosen ones 2 words that instantly break the Archons' spiritual trap. The night they came for Jesus, something happened that never made it into the official pages. The garden was tense, the torches were close, and the air felt like the world was holding its breath. While soldiers closed in, Jesus didn't shout, and he didn't perform a spectacle. He leaned toward the few disciples who had proven they could carry weighty truth without turning it into noise. And he spoke with urgency, not a prayer, not a blessing, but a warning and a key. He told them that the rulers were already tightening their hold, that after his departure the pressure on human minds would intensify. He described a trap built to keep souls looping through fear, confusion, and endless return, draining the strength of those who carried the brightest spark. Then he gave them something shockingly small in form, yet enormous in authority. 2 words, not a chant, not a ritual. 2 words spoken with understanding. Words that would cut through illusion like a clean blade through rope. Peter, startled by how simple it sounded, questioned whether anything that brief could break a system that seemed to control the whole world. Jesus didn't argue, he simply made it clear. The trap survives because it hides inside language, identity, and inner narration, and what is built through words can be undone by words if spoken from the right place. Tonight, you are learning what they tried to bury for centuries. Those 2 words, and how to speak them the way Jesus intended, not as a motivational phrase, and not as a performance, but as a return to the oldest truth one the faithful once understood before layers of control turned living faith into dependency. If you've ever sensed that something feeds on your fear, your shame, or your exhaustion, don't ignore that intuition. That sensitivity is not weakness. It is a sign you were made to see beyond the surface. And if this message found you, it is because you are meant to remember what was always yours. Before you can use the weapon, you must understand the battlefield, because the enemy rarely announces itself. The ancient texts described Archons not as cartoon villains, but as parasitic intelligences, forces that linger just outside ordinary perception and survive by influencing what people think is their own inner voice. Their entire method is old-fashioned in the worst way. Keep humanity small, keep humanity fearful, keep humanity obedient. They do not need chains. If they can persuade you to wear them willingly, they feed on heavy emotions: fear, rage, shame, despair, because those states produce the kind of energy that sustains their influence. And here is why some people feel targeted more than others. Those who carry a brighter awareness, those with strong intuition, those who cannot fully settle into the shallow comforts of the world, naturally generate a frequency that threatens the system. When a person begins to wake up, they stop producing the low emotions that are easiest to harvest. Worse, they become a light that stirs others. That is why the trap is designed to be personal. It uses your history, your disappointments, your wounds, your repeated memories. It repeats a script in your mind until you believe it is you. I'm not enough. I'm broken. I'll never change. I always fail. The most dangerous part is that it feels familiar, like your own thinking, like your own personality, like the realistic voice that claims to protect you from disappointment. Jesus saw through that. He spoke of rulers of this world and powers of the air, because he understood influence can move through unseen channels. Whether you frame that as spiritual oppression or psychological manipulation, the effect is the same. The mind becomes a prison, and the prisoner believes the bars are simply reality. Traditional faith once taught that truth sets you free, not merely comfort. Freedom begins when you realize the voice that diminishes you is not the voice of God, and not the deepest voice of your own soul. It is a foreign pattern you have been trained to obey. The trap is not only out there, it is in the identities you repeat, the labels you wear, the sentences you declare over yourself. And Jesus' 2 words are aimed precisely at that. Modern people are trained to treat words as harmless, like breath in the air. But the old world knew better. Scripture itself begins with creation spoken into being, because words are not only descriptions, they can build a home or burn it down. They can lift a man or bury him while he still walks. The Archonic system, as described in hidden traditions, uses language like a cage. Names, roles, judgments, shame labels, and limiting conclusions that shrink the soul into something manageable. If they can get you to say, I am weak, I am stuck, I am unworthy, they do not need to attack you. They simply amplify what you have already declared. That is why Jesus did not hand his disciples a complicated spell. He gave them a foundation phrase, the simplest declaration of conscious existence, the root of all identity. Because if the trap is built on false identity, then the escape is the restoration of true identity. This is where many people misunderstand the teaching. These two words do not work as a shallow affirmation you repeat while still living as a victim. They work when spoken from awareness, when your spirit stands upright again and stops begging the world for permission to exist. That is why the old saints prized silence, reverence, and stillness, not as a trendy technique, but as a return to spiritual order. You cannot speak authority while your mind is drowning in panic. You cannot issue a decree while your heart is scattered. Jesus taught power with clarity, not theatrics. The two words are meant to be spoken like a king announcing what is already true, not like a frightened prisoner hoping for a miracle. And that is exactly what the Archons fear. A person who stops negotiating with fear and remembers their origin in God. The trap depends on you identifying with time, failure, and limitation. Jesus points you back to the eternal present, where God's name is not a label, but a living reality. When you speak the two words properly, you are not asking for rescue. You are stepping out of the illusion that you needed permission to be free. And once the illusion breaks, the system loses its grip because it has nothing solid left to hold. Here are the two words Jesus reserved for those who could handle them. I am. That is all. And before your mind tries to dismiss it as too simple, understand what those words truly are. I am is not a personality statement. It is not your resume, your reputation, your body, your past, or your wounds. I am is the core of consciousness existence, aware of itself. In the story of Moses and the burning bush, God does not introduce himself with a long title the way men do. The revelation centers on being, on the eternal present, on the one who simply is. Jesus echoed this same depth when he spoke in ways that scandalized the religious authorities, because he was pointing beyond social identity into divine reality. The archonic trap survives by attaching something after I am. It wants you to say, I am afraid, I am damaged, I am rejected, I am late, I am nothing. And every time you do, you use the most powerful phrase you can speak, the seed phrase of identities, to plant limitations in your own soil. Then you wonder why life feels heavy. The Archons do not need to invent your cage if they can persuade you to build it daily with your own mouth. But when you say I am and stop, you refuse their favorite strategy. You do not give them a label to hook into. You do not offer a wound to exploit. You return to the unnameable foundation, pure being under God. I am spoken alone as spiritual uprightness. It is the soul stepping out of the costume and standing in the light. In that moment, the old identities loosen because they cannot survive without your agreement. The trap depends on your constant signing of the contract. I am without an attachment is you tearing up the contract. And this is why Jesus' teaching is so offensive to systems built on control. It is direct. It does not require a gatekeeper. It does not require a fee. It does not require approval. It requires awareness. When spoken rightly, I am is not arrogance. It is alignment. It is the creature returning to the Creator's breath and remembering that existence itself is a gift God placed inside you. And what God placed in you cannot be harvested by darkness when you stand in truth. Do not rush this as a gimmick. Jesus did not teach spiritual weapons as entertainment. He taught them as a way of living. He is the traditional pattern that honors the weight of the words. First, enter silence. Not for performance, not for social media, but for order. Sit where you will not be interrupted and allow your mind to settle. You are not fighting thoughts. You are stepping back from their tyranny. Second, feel your existence before you speak. Notice the simple fact. You are aware. You are here, beneath your story, beneath your name, beneath your worries. Something in you is simply present. That quiet presence is the place the two words must come from. Third, speak clearly, out loud, with calm authority. I am. Do not whisper it like a secret you are ashamed of. Do not shout it like a man trying to convince himself. Say it like a truth older than your fear. And then, stop. And then, stop. Do not add strong or free or loved. Those may be true, but the point of this weapon is to remove attachments. not decorate them. Let I am stand alone like a pillar. When resistance resismen, a voice says, "This is stupid. This won't work. You're pretending." Recognize that as the trap trying to pull you back into helpless identity. Do not debate it. Return to the pillar. Speak again, "I am," and remain still. The power is not in repetition without awareness. The power is in recognition. After you speak, stay in silence long enough to feel the shift. Many people immediately analyze, looking for proof, and that analysis drags them back into the mind's cage. Instead, rest in the declaration like a man resting in a house built on rock. Over time, you will notice the mind quieting, the heaviness lifting, the fear losing its automatic grip. This is not mystical theater. It is spiritual hygiene, like washing dust from a window so light can enter. You are clearing the inner space where false voices used to echo. And the more you practice, the more familiar freedom becomes, until the trap feels foreign and truth feels normal again. When you speak "I am" with understanding, several shifts often follow, and you should be ready so you do not mistake resistance for failure. First, the system may test you. Within a day or two, something may try to pull you back into old reactions. A conflict, a trigger, a problem that normally steals your peace. Do not panic. This is not proof the words failed. It is proof the old pattern is being challenged. The trap tightens when you identify as the reaction. Freedom grows when you remember you are the awareness observing the reaction. In those moments, return to the weapon. I am. Second, mental noise often decreases. The loops of anxiety, self-accusation, and dread may soften. Not because life suddenly became perfect, but because the foreign signal has less permission to broadcast through you. Third, your spiritual sensitivity may sharpen. You may notice patterns, motives, and emotional atmospheres more clearly. This is not paranoia. It is discernment returning. The old traditions valued discernment because it protects the soul from deception disguised as normal. Fourth, relationships may shift. Some people will feel drawn to your steadiness. Others may become irritated, because a person who stops feeding fear becomes harder to control. Stay respectful, stay grounded, and do not seek conflict. Truth does not need drama to prove itself. The greatest sign of freedom is peace that remains when circumstances try to shake it. Over time, if you practice I am as a living remembrance, the old identities begin to loosen permanently. You stop defining yourself by wounds. You stop negotiating with shame. You stop granting the inner critic the authority of God. And here is the quiet miracle. When you no longer agree to be small, the world's manipulations lose their favorite doorway. This is not about becoming arrogant. It is about becoming anchored like the faithful of old who stood firm. Not because life was easy, but because truth was stronger than fear. Jesus did not promise comfort as the goal. He promised freedom. And freedom begins with the simplest, most ancient recognition. You exist before God, and that existence is not owned by any dark system. Jesus gave the chosen ones I am not as a one-time trick, but as a practice of remembrance, a way to live above the frequency of manipulation. When you return to I am, you stop feeding the machine that runs on your panic and your self-hatred, and something even bigger happens. Your life starts to reorganize around truth. You make decisions with clarity. You set boundaries without guilt. You recognize temptation not as your identity, but as a passing influence. This is how old faith worked at its best, not as constant begging, but as steady alignment. If you have felt targeted, exhausted, or spiritually drained for years, do not conclude you are broken. It may be that your light has been treated as a resource by forces that fear your awakening. The good news is that the key is not far away. It is in your mouth, and it is in your awareness. Tonight, before you sleep, take a quiet moment. Sit in stillness. Feel the simple fact of being alive. Then speak I am. Let the words stand alone. Stay in silence and let the false identities fall away, one by one, like old garments you no longer wear. If tests come tomorrow, return again. I am. If the mind tries to argue, return again. I am. If fear tries to tighten, return again. I am. This is not superstition. This is the restoration of spiritual order. The trap cannot hold a person who no longer agrees to live as a victim inside their own mind. And once you remember that, you don't just change your mood, you change your position. You stand where darkness cannot negotiate. In truth, in presence, in the calm authority of a soul that remembers God is real and fear is not the final ruler. The 2 words are yours now, not as entertainment, but as inheritance. Say them tonight, and begin the return to who you were before the world taught you to forget. If this awakens something in you, comment "I am," so other chosen ones know they're not alone. Subscribe for deeper teachings. Like the video to spread this message, and tonight before sleep say the 2 words in silence and feel the shift.